Okay, Shalom Aleichem. Welcome to 10 Minutes of Torah. Today's a very happy day. Every day should be a happy day. When I grew up, I didn't have a television in my house, but I knew that there was a television show that had a Jew in it who was very cool. His name was Henry Winkler. So when we were kids, we all worshipped Henry Winkler because he was the Fonz, right? And the show was called Happy Days.
That's how that was.
So Purim is Happy Days. So here's to Happy Days and celebration. It's a leap year this year, so we have a double dose of happiness. And today, if it wasn't a leap year, we would be we'd be fasting and getting ready to party, which is itself a paradox. But we do paradox well. So let's talk about Purim just for a couple minutes, and maybe we can circle back to the Parsha. And the reason that Purim can hold such paradoxes, we're fasting, mourning Esther. At the same time, we're getting ready to dance and sing and say l'chaim, is because theologically speaking and spiritually speaking, Purim embodies all the deepest paradoxes of the Jewish experience. How so? On one hand, let's look at the text of Purim. That's a good place to really decipher the paradox of Purim. The text itself, Megillat Esther, is part of Tanakh. It's part of what we call the scriptures or the Torah. Torah is a blanket description that encompasses not just the scrolls, but all the books of the writings and the prophets. It just so happens to be that we actually do write the Megillah down on a scroll, and it's called the Scroll of Esther. But the paradox is in the following. The cutoff date for being considered one of the books of the Tanakh was that it had to be in the era of prophecy. It had to be, there had to be a channel open that was still broadcasting live in order for any of these books or any of the prophets, any of those works to be canonized and to be considered the direct word of God. There had to be a line, a link, a live feed that was still active that we call prophecy in order to qualify. And the paradox of the Megillah of Esther is that it occurred and was recorded right after that period, right after the cutoff date. And so it doesn't essentially qualify. It doesn't have that characteristic of direct prophecy, and yet it has the privileges that comes along with an era of prophecy. So in that sense, it has a personality, it has a message. And the message is very powerful, that in a certain way, even without direct flow and revelation from above to below, there's in a certain sense, the Torah that comes from within the imagination and the thought process and the creativity of human consciousness, without the supplementary input of the divine consciousness, still on a certain level bears the hallmark of revelation, and all the authority and the power and the energy that comes along with that. And so it's almost a redefinition of what bestows a divine power on a text. And here we see very clearly that though it lacks the cachet of what we call Torah shebiktav, the written Torah, and doesn't have the full characteristic and authority that comes with that, it's sending a message. And the message is that there is power within, and obviously the intention is not to send a message of you're great and now just get all obnoxious and conceited. It's not about bestowing undeserved personal power. To the contrary, there's a quality and characteristic of humility that is built in to Jewish ethos, particularly when it comes to studying a Torah text. We have to say a blessing before we study the Torah text, saying this text that we're about to study with our creative energies is beyond us. It's God's Torah. At the same time, there is this emphasis on it coming from within. This was important at the time of Purim because it was the beginning, historically, of ushering in what would become an era of Torah Sheba'al Peh and develop as the oral Torah, which was entirely based on the sacredness, holiness, and tzaddik quality of the sages, but at the same time, it was deeply connected to their ingenuity, to their cleverness, to their thought processes, to their genius, to their intellectual capacity. And it was very much a byproduct of human initiative. And so putting the stamp of the written Torah on something which could easily qualify as oral Torah sends a message that there is a different dimension of godly revelation in human creativity. It takes on a different form. God comes in the background. There's a shadow, a glimpse that we get, and it's not direct revelation. And the power of this is oftentimes a trap. And the notion of human power can lift us up towards something higher, or taken out of context, it could lead us to the golden calf, which is what this week's portion is addressing. Forgiveness for the golden calf. And one of the central modes of forgiveness was the machatzis hashekel. Everybody gave machatzit hashekel, a half a shekel. Why? To have kofer nafsho, to have kapara, to have forgiveness. What is, and it's also directly linked to Purim. What is the forgiveness? The forgiveness is this notion that it's not so much like you get punished. It's an awareness. Yes, you are an autonomous, independent, separate self, and that's by design. And that's something that we must really take advantage of. And we have to stretch the boundaries of every capacity, every capability that God gave us. And turn it over and dig deeper to discover sacredness within, like Torah Sheba'al Peh. But at the same time, we have to understand that we're not alone, even though we're separate. We are but a half of a greater whole. And we have to keep that in mind in our imagination and in our prayerfulness and in our mindfulness that we bring to our human initiative to be the framework that sets the tone for how we dig deep into ourselves. And if we do that with the right perspective, then we don't worship the golden calf. And we find ourselves, and we're surprised when we have that moment of self-discovery. We're finding God there too. It's us. It's the oral Torah. It's our initiative. It's our work. But it's also the Tanakh. It's also part of the scriptures. There is no direct revelation there, but there's a direct connection. And Purim is that paradox that we're whole only when we are aware that we're part of something greater. And ironically, this doesn't minimize us and put us down. It's actually a platform that we can stand tall from. And we can launch ourselves into our lives with gusto and with enthusiasm and with pride in who we are, in the knowledge that we're connected to something greater than who we are. Yom Tov, and let's have a great simcha today, because the purpose and our connectedness to something bigger than us is a source of simcha. Yishar koach. Thanks for joining everybody out there.